I am standing in an empty apartment staring at an engagement ring sitting on the kitchen table. 3 years of my life summed up in that small circle of gold and diamond. I proposed to her believing it was the happiest day of my life. I never imagined that ring, that title of future wife, would become the very thing she felt ashamed of. Let me take you back to where it all began, and how I learned that sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do. Before we dive into this story, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. This story taught me the difference between someone who loves you and someone who loves what you can give them. Trust me, you will want to stay until the end. My name is Grayson. I am 32 years old, and I work as a software engineer at a tech company in Austin, Texas. I grew up in a suburb outside Dallas in a small 3-bedroom house with a backyard just big enough for a grill and a basketball hoop. My father Harold spent 30 years as an electrician, waking up before dawn and coming home with calloused hands. My mother Linda worked as a nurse at the local hospital, pulling double shifts whenever we needed extra money for school supplies or winter coats. We were not rich, but we were not poor either. We were that middle ground where you learn the value of hard work early. I started mowing lawns at 12, worked at a grocery store through high school, and took out student loans to get through college. By the time I graduated with my engineering degree, I understood something fundamental about life. Nothing worth having comes easy, and nothing given freely is truly appreciated. Fast forward to today. I make around $120,000 a year. Good money by any standard. I rent a 2-bedroom apartment that is clean and comfortable, but not flashy. I drive a 2019 Honda Accord that runs perfectly fine. I cook most of my meals at home, take modest vacations, and put a solid chunk of my paycheck into my retirement fund every month. Some people might call me frugal. I prefer the word practical. I met Meredith 3 years ago at a company party thrown by a mutual friend. She was 29, working as a marketing coordinator at an advertising agency downtown. The moment I saw her across the room, something shifted in my chest. She had this effortless grace about her, the way she laughed, the way she tilted her head when she listened to someone speak. When our eyes met, she smiled, and I felt like I had been punched in the stomach in the best possible way. Our first dates were simple: dinner at a Thai restaurant, a movie on a rainy Saturday, walking along the river at sunset, talking about our childhoods, our dreams, our fears. She told me she loved how real I was, how I did not try to impress her with expensive gifts or flashy gestures. She said most guys she dated were all surface, no substance. With me, she felt safe. I believed every word. After 2 years of dating, I decided to propose. I took her back to that same Thai restaurant where we had our first date. I had saved for 6 months to buy a 1-carat diamond ring that cost me $8,000. It was not the biggest ring in the jewelry store, but it was beautiful, and it was mine to give. When I got down on one knee and asked her to marry me, she cried. She said yes. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. I thought that was the beginning of our forever. The first crack appeared about 2 weeks after the engagement. I did not notice it at first because I was too busy being happy. But looking back, the signs were there from the start. Meredith became obsessed with posting our engagement on social media. She took dozens of photos of the ring from every angle, but when she finally posted one, the caption was short, almost dismissive. No gushing paragraph about how lucky she felt. Just a simple announcement with a ring emoji. When her friends asked about the ring in the comments, her replies were vague, non-committal. Then came the night I heard something I was never supposed to hear. I came home early from work one evening, planning to surprise her with takeout from her favorite Italian place. As I walked toward the bedroom, I heard her voice through the half-open door. She was on the phone with her older sister Amanda, and something in her tone made me stop. The ring is fine, I guess. It is just, I expected something bigger. You know, he makes good money. You would think he could do better than this. I stood there in the hallway, the bag of pasta growing cold in my hands. My heart felt like someone had reached inside my chest and squeezed. For a moment, I could not move, could not breathe. Then I heard her laugh at something Amanda said, and the spell broke. I backed away quietly, went to the kitchen, and pretended I had just arrived. When she came out, I smiled and handed her the food. She kissed my cheek and said thank you. She never knew what I had heard. That night, lying in bed next to her, I told myself it was nothing. Women like nice things. That is normal. She did not mean it the way it sounded. I would make it up to her with a beautiful wedding, something she could be proud of. I would show her that I could give her the life she deserved. Looking back, I realized that was the moment I started trying to earn love that should have been freely given. And that is a battle you can never win. The wedding planning began in earnest, and with it came a version of Meredith I had never seen before. Or maybe she had always been there, hiding beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge. She wanted the venue to be at an exclusive resort in Hill Country, about an hour outside Austin. The price tag for just the location was $25,000. When I saw the number, my stomach dropped. But Meredith looked at me with those eyes, told me she had dreamed of a wedding like this her whole life, and I found myself nodding. I told her we would make it work. The guest list grew to 200 people. I knew maybe 40 of them. The rest were her co-workers, her college friends, her parents' friends, people whose names I could not keep straight. When I suggested we trim the list to save money, she looked at me like I had suggested we get married at a gas station. Then came the wedding dress. Meredith found a designer who would create a custom gown for $12,000. $12,000 for a dress she would wear once. When I gently asked if there might be other options, her face hardened. "This is my wedding day, Grayson. Do you want me to look cheap in front of everyone?" I wrote the check. The wedding planner cost $10,000. The live band she insisted on instead of a DJ added another $5,000. Every week there was a new expense, a new must-have item that would make our wedding perfect. I watched my savings account drain like water through a sieve, and I said nothing. I told myself this was what you do when you love someone. You sacrifice. The engagement party was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it became the night I truly began to see. We held it at an upscale restaurant downtown. I paid $10,000 for the private room, the catering, the open bar. The guests were almost entirely from Meredith's world. My family consisted of my parents and my younger sister Sophie, sitting at a table in the corner, looking as out of place as I felt. About an hour into the party, I found myself surrounded by a group of Meredith's friends. Her best friend Kelsey, a sharp-featured woman with perfectly manicured nails and a perpetual look of judgment in her eyes, started asking me about my work. "So, you are a software engineer, like you write code and stuff?" I nodded, explained what I did, tried to make it sound interesting. Kelsey exchanged a look with the other women. "Oh, I thought Meredith would end up with someone more, executive level. No offense." I waited for Meredith to say something. She was standing right there, close enough to touch. Instead, she let out a nervous laugh and changed the subject to the wedding venue. She did not defend me. She did not even look at me. Later that evening, I went looking for her and found voices coming from a side room. The door was slightly open and I recognized Kelsey's sharp tone immediately. "So, are you actually happy with him, Meredith?" "Like really happy." There was a pause. Then my fiancé's voice tinged with something that sounded like resignation. "He is a good guy. Stable, But sometimes I wonder if I could have done better. Look at Jessica. Her fiancé is a VP at Goldman Sachs. And here I am with a guy who writes code." I stood frozen outside that door. The words hit me like physical blows, one after another. Good guy. Stable. Could have done better. I was not her dream come true. I was her consolation prize. I walked back to the party on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Sophie found me a few minutes later, her brow furrowed with concern. "Grayson, are you okay? You look pale." "I am fine. Just tired." I was not fine. I was drowning in a room full of people who saw me exactly the way my fiancé did. As less than. As not enough. The following weekend, I drove to Dallas to visit my parents. My father must have seen something in my face because after dinner, he grabbed 2 beers and nodded toward the back porch. We sat in the old wooden chairs he had built himself 20 years ago, looking out at the yard where I used to shoot hoops as a kid. For a while, neither of us spoke. That was always our way. Then I told him everything. The ring comment, the engagement party, the overheard conversation. My father listened without interrupting. When I finished, he took a long sip of his beer and stared at the darkening sky. Son, your mother and I have been married for 35 years. We started with nothing. I mean nothing. Our first apartment had roaches and a leak in the ceiling. But she never not once made me feel like I was not enough. He turned to look at me, his weathered face serious. A woman who loves you will build you up, not tear you down when you think no one is listening. Marriage is not about what you can give someone. It is about who you are willing to become together. I nodded, but in my heart I was still making excuses. Maybe she was just stressed about the wedding. Maybe once we were married things would be different. Maybe I was overreacting. I drove back to Austin the next day, determined to give Meredith one more chance. I wish I had listened to my father sooner. But sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you are ready to climb. 2 weeks before the wedding, we attended a birthday party for a mutual friend named Derek. It was held at a trendy bar downtown, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and cocktails that cost $18. About 50 people were there, mostly professionals in their 30s, the kind who talked about stock options and vacation homes like they were discussing the weather. I was getting Meredith a drink when I noticed a man approaching her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His name was Victor, and I later learned he was the CEO of some investment firm. He moved through the crowd like he owned it, which, knowing his type, he probably thought he did. I watched from the bar as Victor engaged Meredith in conversation. His body language was unmistakable. He stood too close, laughed too loud at whatever she said, touched her arm when he made a point. And Meredith did not step back. She leaned in. When I walked over with her drink, Victor barely acknowledged me. His eyes flicked over me once dismissively, then returned to Meredith. "So I hear you are getting married." "Who is the lucky guy?" Meredith gestured toward me, but there was something reluctant in the movement, like she was admitting to something embarrassing. "This is Grayson, my fiancé." Victor looked at me again, this time with a small smile that made my skin crawl. "Well, you could have done better, Meredith. But I suppose stability has its charm." He said it like a joke, but it was not a joke. It was a knife, and he knew exactly where to stick it. Meredith laughed. She actually laughed. "Well, you know how it is. Sometimes you have to be practical." Victor clapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends. "Good for you, man. You really scored above your league." I waited. I waited for Meredith to say something, anything to defend me, to tell this arrogant stranger that she loved me, that I was more than enough, that he had no right to speak to her future husband that way. She said nothing. She just smiled and sipped her drink. I managed to get through the rest of the party on autopilot. But later, when we were alone in a quiet corner, I could not hold it in anymore. "Why did you not say anything? That guy basically insulted me to my face." Meredith sighed like I was a child throwing a tantrum over nothing. "Grayson, come on. You are being too sensitive. Victor is just from a different world. Besides, being called your future wife does make me look like I settled for less in front of these people. Do you not see that the words hung in the air between us? Settled for less." She had actually said it. Out loud. To my face. "Is that what you think, that you settled for less by being with me?" She rolled her eyes. "I did not mean it like that. I just wish you were more, I do not know, more impressive. More successful. Someone people would look at and think, wow, she did well." I stared at the woman I had planned to spend my life with. The woman I had emptied my savings for, the woman I had twisted myself into knots trying to please. And I finally saw her clearly. I understand now. I turned and walked out of that bar alone. She called after me, but I did not stop. I did not look back. That night I sat in my dark apartment and let everything wash over me. Every ignored insult, every backhanded comment. Every time I had told myself it would get better when I knew in my gut it would not. My father's words echoed in my mind. A woman who loves you will build you up, not tear you down. I was done being torn down. I opened my laptop and got to work. First, I called the resort in Hill Country. The woman who answered sounded confused when I told her I needed to cancel the wedding. "Sir, you will lose your $10,000 deposit." "I know. Cancel it." Next, I emailed the wedding planner and informed her that her services were no longer needed. I called the bridal shop and canceled the custom dress order. I contacted the caterer, the florist, the band. One by one, I dismantled the wedding that Meredith had dreamed of and I had paid for. I lost about $18,000 in deposits that night. It felt like the best money I had ever spent. Then I sat down to write a letter. I did not yell. I did not accuse. I simply wrote the truth. I told her about the phone call with her sister that I overheard, about the engagement party, about Victor and the way she stood there and let him humiliate me, about every moment she made me feel like I was not enough. I included copies of every receipt, every check, every invoice from the wedding planning, the venue, the dress, the planner, the band, all of it. And at the bottom, I wrote my final words to her. "You said being with me made you look like you settled for less. So I am giving you the freedom to find more. I hope you find what you are looking for. But I also hope that one day you realize real love is not about finding someone impressive. It is about finding someone who makes you feel like you are enough exactly as you are." The next morning, while Meredith was at work, I packed my things. It did not take long. I left the ring on the kitchen table next to the envelope. Then I closed the door on 3 years of my life and walked away. I texted my sister Sophie on the way out. "It is over. I will explain later. I am okay." And for the first time in months, I actually meant it. The aftermath was predictable. Meredith came home to an empty apartment and a letter that turned her world upside down. My phone exploded with calls and messages. At first, she was furious. "Grayson, what the hell is this? You cannot just leave like this. We have a wedding in 2 weeks. Then came the bargaining. "Please pick up. I did not mean what I said. We can work this out. I love you." Then the guilt trips. "You are throwing away 3 years over a stupid comment. How can you be so cold?" I read every message. I did not respond to a single one. After 3 days, I blocked her number. Whatever she had to say, I had already heard enough. The first month after leaving Meredith was harder than I expected. I moved back in with my parents, temporarily sleeping in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by old basketball trophies and faded posters. Some nights I lay awake until 3 in the morning, replaying every moment, wondering if I had made a mistake. My mother seemed to sense when those nights happened. She would have my favorite breakfast waiting the next morning, pancakes with blueberries and real maple syrup. She never asked questions, just set the plate in front of me and squeezed my shoulder. My father kept it simple. One evening, as we were fixing a broken fence post in the backyard, he stopped and looked at me. "You did the right thing, son. I know it does not feel like it yet, but you did." Sophie visited every weekend. She would drag me out of the house for walks, ice cream runs, trips to the driving range. She never let me sink too deep into myself. After a month, I returned to Austin. I found a small studio apartment near my office, nothing fancy but enough space for one person to start over. I threw myself into work, volunteering for challenging projects that kept my mind occupied. I started going to the gym every morning at 6, running the trail around Town Lake, until my lungs burned and my head was empty of everything except the next step. Slowly, I began to rebuild. A coworker named Marcus invited me to join his fishing trips on the weekends. We would drive out to a lake an hour from the city, sit in silence for hours, occasionally talking about nothing important. It was exactly what I needed. I joined a book club that met at a coffee shop near my apartment. Most of the members were strangers, people who knew nothing about my past or my broken engagement. With them, I could just be Grayson, the guy who liked crime novels and always brought the best snacks. I started writing in a journal every night. At first, it was just a way to empty my head before sleep. But over time, it became something more. I started to see patterns in my past moments where I had ignored my instincts, times I had accepted less than I deserved, because I was afraid of being alone. I realized something important. I would rather be alone than be with someone who made me feel lonely. 6 months after the breakup, I ran into Derek at a coffee shop. He hesitated when he saw me, then came over to my table. "I heard about you and Meredith." "I am sorry, man." I shrugged. "It is what it is." He sat down without being invited, which told me he had something to say. "Look, I do not know if you want to hear this, but she started dating Victor after you left. The guy from my birthday party." I felt a flicker of something, but it was not jealousy or anger. Just a tired recognition of a pattern. "How did that work out?" Derek shook his head. 3 months. He dumped her for someone younger. She had to move in with her sister because she could not afford her apartment alone. I nodded slowly. I did not feel satisfaction or vindication. Just a kind of distant sadness for someone who had never learned that chasing status would always leave you empty. "I hope she figures things out." Derek looked surprised by my response. But all I felt was peace. 1 year after I left, I was promoted to senior engineer. My salary increased significantly, and I finally had enough saved for a down payment on a small condo. The day I signed the papers, my hands were shaking, but it was from excitement, not fear. I had built this life myself. No one could take it from me. The universe has a strange sense of timing. A few weeks after I moved into my new place, I walked into a coffee shop and saw her. Meredith was sitting alone at a corner table staring at her phone. She looked different. Thinner. Tired. The confident glow I remembered was gone. She looked up and saw me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she stood smoothing her clothes nervously. "Grayson." "Hi." "Hi, Meredith." We stood there in awkward silence. She looked like she wanted to say something but could not find the words. "I am sorry," she finally managed. "For everything." I looked at her, this woman who had once made me feel like I would never be enough. And I realized I felt nothing. Not anger, not resentment, not even pity. Just a calm acceptance of what was. "I forgive you, Meredith. Not for you, but for myself. I spent too long carrying that weight." Her eyes filled with tears. "I was so stupid. I did not realize what I had until it was gone." I nodded slowly. "I hope you find what you are looking for. But more importantly, I hope you learn to be happy with who you are, not just who you are with." I gave her a small smile, nodded once, and walked out of the coffee shop. I did not look back. That evening, I stood on the balcony of my new condo, watching the sun set over Austin. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and somewhere in the distance I could hear music playing. I thought about everything I had been through. The love I thought was real. The betrayal that broke me open. The slow, painful process of putting myself back together. Meredith once said that being with me made her look like she settled for less. But standing there in a home I had earned, surrounded by a life I had built, I understood the truth. She was the one who settled. She settled for chasing impressions instead of building connections. She settled for a man who saw her as a trophy instead of a partner. She settled for less every single day, and she never even knew it. I did not settle. I walked away. And in doing so, I found something she could never give me. Peace. So let me ask you this. Have you ever stayed in a situation where you knew you deserved better, just because you were afraid of being alone? Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved because they could not see your worth? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And if you have not already, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next story. Thank you for being here with me. I wish you the courage to know your worth, the strength to walk away from anyone who does not see it, and the peace that comes from loving yourself first. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.